Stories, Philippines, podcast.
Proceed with caution, dear listener, for the shadows we explore today are deep and unsettling. This narrative contains mature themes and graphic descriptions. Listener prudence is strongly encouraged. Imagine the suffocating darkness of a stone dungeon, a space so tight and airless that the very act of breathing feels like a violation. Can you hear the echo of booted footsteps above the wet scrape of a rusty lock turning, and then a sudden blinding flare of lantern light? Think of a man, a priest, dressed in the heavy rough-spun habit of his order, his hands bound, his face stained with fear and sweat. He is dragged, not gently, but like a sack of unwanted goods, down cold, slippery steps. This is a man of God, a man of faith, but in this moment, he is reduced to an animal cornered and awaiting the slaughter. What unspeakable treason could a spiritual man have committed to earn such a brutal sentence within the walls of the place built to protect the very crown and cross he served? What terror could rip a soul so violently from its body that its ghostly imprint remains centuries later, forever tethered to the place of its demise? I am Paul, and you are listening to Stories Philippines podcast. Our story begins in the year 1945, a time when the walled city of Intramuros, a proud relic of Spanish colonialism in Manila, was being torn apart. This was not the elegant, slow decay of time, but a savage, apocalyptic undoing. The Japanese Imperial Army, desperate and cornered, transformed this ancient city into a fortress of brutal resistance against the advancing American and Filipino forces. Intramuros became a slaughterhouse, a killing field where the sacred and the profane were shredded together. But our focus is not on the widespread devastation, it is on a specific corner of that tragedy, the legendary Fort Santiago, a bastion of stone overlooking the Pasig River. Fort Santiago itself is a tapestry of dark history. Long before the cataclysm of the 1940s, it was here that political prisoners were kept, tortured, and executed. It was a place of iron bars and echoing screams, a place where hope went to die, a suffocating atmosphere that permeates the stone even now. Let us consider a man, a fictionalized composite of many who suffered during those times. We shall call him Father Rafael de la Vega. Father Raphael was not a combatant. He was a Jesuit, a scholar, and a keeper of the archives and relics of his order. He was a quiet man, known for his kindness and his uncompromising moral compass. His crime in the eyes of the occupying power was simple. He had been secretly aiding resistance fighters, providing medical supplies hidden within church donations, and passing coded messages disguised as religious tracts. He believed his duty to his people transcended any oath of non-interference. The day they found his treasonous activities was a day of relentless rain in early February of 1945. The air in his small rectory room was thick with the smell of wet paper and fear. He was betrayed by a desperate congregant seeking favor from the oppressors. He was taken not to an ordinary prison, but directly to Fort Santiago, into the dreaded Baluarte de Santa Barbara section, which housed the dungeons, a series of subterranean chambers designed to flood with the high tide from the river, a slow, agonizing death for those left within their walls. In a different era, a much earlier one, the 16th and 17th centuries, the walled city was rife with tales of encantos and nature spirits, powerful beings that predated the Spanish arrival. The Filipinos then, as now, had a deep respect for the unseen world. When the Spanish came and brought their own stories of demons, fallen angels, and the eternal battle between good and evil, these narratives did not replace the local beliefs, they blended with them. The capre, a giant tree-dwelling spirit, took on aspects of the European ogre. The malevolent aswang was conveniently labeled a witch in the European mold, and the countless nameless ghosts of the Spanish period prisoners, soldiers, and priests became a new kind of restless dead trapped by sin or violence. The Catholic Church in the Philippines found itself in a peculiar position. It preached the structured theological view of the afterlife and spiritual entities, but it also had to contend with the deeply ingrained animistic beliefs of the people. Priests often found themselves performing localized exorcisms or blessings not just against the devil, but against what the people called masamang espiritu, or malevolent local entities. The belief in a soul's eternal torment for a grave sin or a violent death was a shared international parallel. The European concept of the wandering Jew or the lady in white were just different clothes for the same fundamental fear. A soul that cannot find peace. This is the dark history behind Father Raphael and the countless others. They died not in the glory of battle, but in the cold anonymity of a prison cell or a dungeon. Father Raphael was brutally interrogated for 3 days and 3 nights. They wanted the names of his contacts and the location of the main resistance cell. He never gave them up. His refusal sealed his fate. In the pre-dawn hours of a cloudy day, his execution was ordered. Not a simple firing squad, but a more grotesque spectacle, a warning. They took him to a secluded courtyard deep within the Fort Santiago complex near the gatehouse. The details are horrifying. A Japanese officer, a man named Lieutenant Tanaka, a composite of the most brutal of the Kempeitai or military police, infamous for their cruelty, was ordered to carry out the sentence with a katana, a ceremonial sword. In this barbaric act, the spiritual was violently severed from the mortal. The head of Father Raphael was struck from his body, a swift, clean blow that was meant to be terrifyingly efficient. The body and head were disposed of hastily, likely thrown into the river or one of the common mass graves that peppered the Intramuros landscape. But something profound and terrifying happened in that moment, a massive spiritual rupture. The priest's soul, utterly unprepared for such a sudden and violent end, refused to leave the physical location of its final betrayal and execution. Now let's fast forward to the 1980s, a time of relative calm for the ancient walls of Intramuros. The Fort Santiago ruins were slowly being restored and transformed into a historical park, a tourist destination. But the calm was only on the surface. Beneath it, the terror continued. Consider the story of a night watchman named Crisanto de Guzman. Crisanto was an old-school Filipino, a man who feared God and respected the spirits. He worked the night shift in Fort Santiago for almost a decade. He was a no-nonsense man, but his face would always pale when he spoke of the area around the dungeons and the Puerta Real, or royal date. One humid evening in the summer of 1988, Crisanto was making his rounds near the Balaorte de Santa Barbara, the very place where Father Raphael had been held. The air was dead still, devoid of the usual sounds of nocturnal insects. As he passed the narrow alleyway connecting the main plaza to the dungeons, he heard a soft, wet, dragging sound. He froze, his flashlight beam shaking. He saw it. A figure cloaked in the brown habit of a Spanish friar or priest. It was floating, hovering barely above the ground, a strange misty quality to its form. But the most horrifying detail was the lack of a head. The neck was a clean, dark line from which no blood flowed, but from which a strange, low keening sound seemed to emanate, a sound of profound loss and confusion. The figure was moving slowly, blindly searching with its spectral hands outstretched, feeling the cold stone walls. Crisanto, a large man by nature, found himself paralyzed, a fear so primal that it bypassed his rational mind. The headless priest moved past him, oblivious in its spectral quest. Crisanto did not wait for a second pass. He ran until his lungs burned. Such apparitions are not unique to Fort Santiago. The Tower of London has its headless Anne Boleyn, a queen who met her end by the executioner's blade. Germany has the legend of the Headless Horseman. International folklore is saturated with tales of those violently decapitated, their spirits doomed to eternally search for the missing piece of themselves, a necessary part of the spiritual whole required for safe passage to the afterlife. In the Philippines, this kind of ghost is called a kaluluwang naligaw, a lost soul eternally wandering but with a specific and tangible wound. Let's turn to the modern paranormal investigation findings. In the 2000s, a small group of Manila-based paranormal enthusiasts, calling themselves the Kamayan Paranormal Group, conducted a series of overnight investigations in Fort's Instagram, focusing specifically on the dungeons and the courtyard where executions took place. Their leader, a young man named Leandro Leo Santiago, an engineer by trade and a skeptic by nature, recorded some compelling evidence. Using electromagnetic field meters or EMF detectors, they found spikes that went far beyond normal electrical interference in the very corner Crisanto de Guzman had described years earlier. But the most chilling evidence came from their electronic voice phenomenon or EVP recordings. In a series of long silent recordings, they captured a faint but clear whisper. The word was in Spanish, padre or father, followed by a desperate low moan and then a word that sounded like cabeza or head. Leo attempted to provide a scientific and psychological perspective on the phenomenon. He proposed that the immense collective trauma of the Fort Santiago deaths, particularly the gruesome and politically charged executions, had left an energy imprint on the stone structure. This theory, sometimes called the stone tape theory, suggests that certain emotional and violent events are somehow reported by the environment like a geological video recorder. The ghost is not a sentient spirit but a replay of a terrible memory. From a psychological viewpoint, the sightings could be explained as pareidolia, the human mind's tendency to see patterns in random stimuli, or the manifestation of collective trauma, a shared psychological defense mechanism where a community externalizes its historical pain into a recognizable figure, a ghost. The headless priest becomes a symbol of the spiritual death of an entire era. Theological insights are equally fascinating. The Catholic Church has a complex view on ghosts. While they do not officially endorse the concept of a haunting in the popular sense, they do acknowledge the reality of souls in purgatory or the occasional presence of a soul prevented from entering heaven due to some unresolved earthly matter or sin. In the case of Father Raphael, a martyr for his people, the theological question is, why would his soul be trapped? The answer is perhaps that the extreme violence of his death, a beheading, prevented the proper rites, a violation so profound it temporarily disoriented his soul. Or perhaps a demon, a manifestation of the evil that perpetrated the violence, is now wearing his spectral image to sow fear. The Church would advocate for masses and prayers to help the soul find peace. If you have a story, a whisper of the unexplained from the shadows of Philippine history or your own backyard, we want to hear it. Submit your stories to our email storiesphpodcast@gmail.com and we might just share it in a future episode. The Fort Santiago of today is a lush green space, but if you walk the grounds, particularly near the dungeon entrance and the remnants of the old chapel, you can feel the oppressive weight of history. The air is slightly cooler, the silence is heavier. The stone walls feel not like protection, but like thick, cold shrouds. The geographic descriptions of the place are key to understanding the haunting. The proximity of the river means the ground is eternally damp, the stone is always cool, and the sense of deep enclosure is inescapable. All perfect ingredients for the preservation of a psychological or spiritual residue. Let us return to the fictionalized execution. After the blow fell, Lieutenant Tanaka felt a strange unease. He was a hardened soldier, but the spiritual authority of the man he had just killed lingered in the air, a palpable pressure. Later that night, one of his soldiers who had helped dispose of the body claimed to have seen a faint light hovering near the execution spot, a light that moved like a searching hand. The soldier was severely reprimanded for his superstition, but the fear spread quietly through the ranks. The ghost of the headless priest of Fort Santiago is thus a blend of three layers of tragedy. It is the ghost of the political prisoner, a symbol of Filipino martyrdom against tyranny. It is the ghost of the clergy, a powerful figure whose spiritual power was violently broken. And it is a classic Filipino muto or ghost, the soul of a victim of violence, forever bound to the earth by an unnatural death. For those interested in delving deeper into the history behind these terrifying tales and the cultural significance of the places we discuss, you can find show notes and support options in the description of this episode. Your support helps us continue to unearth these forgotten chapters. One final story, a more recent one, from the 2000s involves a young tourist guide named Joanna May Pineda. Joanna was a pragmatic woman raised on the stories of her grandmothers, but not easily fooled. She was giving a late evening private tour to a small group of history enthusiasts. As they were standing near the execution courtyard, Joanna felt a sudden, intense feeling of cold and the stifling Manila heat. She looked up and saw a shadow, a strange distortion in the air near the corner where two fixed stone walls met. The shadow seemed to solidify for a split second into the vague shape of a tall, robed man. What struck her was the absolute and complete silence of the apparition. It did not move, it simply was for a moment before melting back into the shadows. What was different about Joanna's account was the feeling she described not of terror, but of profound sorrow, a desperate loneliness. Is the headless priest of Fort Santiago an energy imprint, a collective hallucination, or the actual wandering soul of a forgotten martyr? Does he search for his head to simply be whole again, or is he searching for the ultimate sign of forgiveness for a perceived sin of having dabbled in political affairs? The wall of Fort Santiago holds its secrets tightly. But every night when the tourists leave and the heavy gates are locked and the moon casts long, indifferent shadows over the courtyard, you can almost hear that low, desperate moan, the sound of a holy man eternally seeking what was unjustly taken from him. To truly immerse yourself in the darker recesses of Philippine folklore and history, consider this your invitation to access exclusive content on Patreon. Patrons receive extended cuts, behind-the-scenes notes, and extra stories that we cannot fit into our regular episodes. The story of the headless priest serves as a chilling reminder: is the true horror not the apparition itself, but the human depravity that created it? We leave you with this thought. A person can be killed, a body can be severed, but can an idea, a deeply held faith, or a fundamental quest for justice ever truly be destroyed? What unspeakable pain must a soul endure to be eternally tethered to the cold stone of its tomb? Thank you for listening to Stories Philippines podcast. If you're intrigued by the secrets that history tries to bury, be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share this podcast with a friend. We invite you to delve into our past episodes for more forgotten tales and to support the podcast financially in ways you can find in the show notes. We will be here weighing in the shadows when you return for our next episode.